Elon is not lying when he says, I think that we live in the most interesting of times.
Like I wake up every day and there's something interesting to chew into with my brain. And a lot of people are already overloaded, but this is the sweet spot for me. It would be idiotic to do something that doesn't align with reality. Reality dictates everything. Thank God everybody didn't learn to code. Building a vehicle is like the most complex and difficult thing to manufacture in the world. Now, if you want to make money and invest, well, I know where I'm putting my money because it's Elon and his companies.
Grok came from so far behind that for it to be even in that conversation right now is pretty crazy.
Imagine if Elon would have jumped into AI with both feet.
Exactly.
Like years earlier. We would probably already be at AGI because what it's really going to negatively impact is the general public over the next few years. And I don't know at what point, what prices have to get to before, you start hitting blackouts and things like that.
Energy is actually kind of a big deal, especially if we want to not get our butts handed to us by China in the AI race. There's a lot of recognition across the industry that the types of things that Elon has been saying for so long were actually true, and that the bottlenecks that he identified were critical bottlenecks and we're moving forward. So I just wanted to sit down with you, Jordan, and get your general reaction. Where's your head at, given the place that the United States is in relative to China in energy, the different technologies for energy, and the race for at least AI equality, if not supremacy? How are you processing this very complicated landscape that Elon and Tesla and the United States and China all find ourselves in together?
Well, I guess to your primary point there, it's an emergent space and everybody's trying to get their heads around it. Just like everybody was trying to get their heads around batteries and Battery Day 5 years ago, the conversation is going to evolve. And you can see different people, what sort of stage the conversation that they're in. And it doesn't help that the landscape is shifting every day because of, for instance, the current administration. Earlier this year, they were saying, hey, we're going to take any electron that we can get, and we're not going to be biased as to where that comes from. It's turned out they're very biased about where they get those electrons from.
Drill, baby, drill.
Yeah. Chris Wright is, well, you've seen my frustrations that I posted on X, but we have to see how it plays out, because a lot of what the administration does as well is sometimes they'll just stir people up for the sake of stirring people up to see what happens. And I do believe that they have an overall strategy, the United States. I don't fully agree with what I've seen so far, but overall it looks to me like their goal is to push the power generation to the AI data centers and to companies, rather than having it built more generally and broadly on a regulated grid. So, and that is a viable strategy if you can knock down the permitting quick enough and you make sure that you don't upset the supply chain too much, which they're creating a bit of chaos there too. So I don't think anybody really knows how it shakes out. But everybody has a strong opinion, though.
Definitely. So do you think, relative to where we were at with energy policy over the last couple of years under the previous administration, even though you don't agree with, the strategy as a whole, is it an improvement? Are we at least getting better?
In the long term, I think the reducing regulation is the better way to go. But there needs to be some sort of transition period. There's been this giant bait and switch with, or I don't know what you call it, with the energy industry. They started building everything out in anticipation of these subsidies, and now they have to rework everything because it's being changed so quickly. If there was a gradual phase out of the approach they were taking and a gradual phase in of the new one, there would be a more smooth handover period. Some would argue that doing it this way accelerates it, but in my view, that's not the case at all, because these uh, the industries that you're talking about and the things that need to happen need to occur over years. And there's a speed limit with at which you can do these things at.
So, yeah, I mean, does that put us at risk
And in the
since,
in the
yeah.
short term, I think it puts us behind. In the longer term, it could put us ahead. But anyhow, continue.
Well, yeah, I mean, the big, obviously, overhang right now is OpenAI, Microsoft, Meta, Google, all of these hyperscalers want to build out as much compute as possible, as quickly as possible. And then you've got sovereign AI around the world, in many places where they are very energy rich, that we're planning to just, go all in. Like, does that create enough of an umbrella from a demand standpoint to really smooth over the chaos of like the short-term uncertainty of some of these investment? I mean, because correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm understanding that you're saying is that a lot of financial decisions and financing has been secured that is contingent upon, trying to do these projects take many, many years to install, to get, up and running, to get integrated into grids. And so like you have to plan 10 years out in order to execute things at this scale. And that, when you change the incentives, you actually change the logic for whether that investment did or did not make sense, whether it is or is not fundable, whether you can or cannot build it. And so we probably have rugged a number of projects that were possible, they were feasible, now they're not. And but with that being said, hey, we know that there's going to be a massive demand for electricity almost assuredly 5 years from now that is, multiple times larger than today's current demand. So does that demand then just the forcing function there actually smooth over these transitions and make some of those projects fundable?
We have to separate whether we're talking about aggregate power generation increases for the entire grid and whether AI data centers are getting enough, because those are two very different questions. As we've seen, like somebody did a post and I reposted it this morning, that electricity prices over the past few years have skyrocketed. Now, part of that will be because of inflationary effects, et cetera. I'm not sure what proportion of that is from AI data centers, but for an AI data center, only 10% of its costs comes from the energy. So costs can significantly increase, and these tech companies can still afford to pay that power. And so they'll get it just as a side effect of market forces. What it's really going to negatively impact is the general public over the next few years. And I don't know at what point, what prices have to get to before, you start hitting blackouts and things like that. That might actually affect these AI data centers. But it's more of a money problem for the tech companies rather than a supply problem in the next couple of years. They have plenty of time in the next few years to build like a massive solar farm in the desert, et cetera. So I'm not worried about them. They can afford to buy those solar panels and batteries and everything it takes in order to power their data centers. But it could be choppy for the general public, and it might be difficult in the next couple of years occasionally. But overall, I'm not concerned about it hampering AI growth.
And how does energy storage like Megapack and other, grid scale energy storage solutions play into that in the short term? Like, is there enough LFP capacity and energy storage capacity to smooth over that transition? I mean, just because, what XAI has done, where they installed, quite a large array of Megapacks, and they have the ability to peak shave so that they're not putting the Memphis grid at risk during, high demand periods of time. I think that's obviously going to be a solution that, now that it's proven that works and it's fast, that I expect more and more of these big data centers to adopt. If they do, is there enough supply of these Megapacks and, other big batteries to meet their demand so that they can reduce their, the amount of peak load that they're putting on the grids?
In my view, yes. I think one of the estimates is that we're going to need like 100 gigawatts of extra power in the next 3 to 5 years for these data centers. Um, there's 100 gigawatts of capacity available on the grid now that's accessible if you're willing to curtail 0.5% of your load. That is, you're willing to reduce the amount of power that you pull from the grid for 0.5% of the time. So let's say that each one of these data centers decided to install 1 or 2 hours worth of reserve capacity to take account for those times. So, you're looking at, let's see here, 100 gigawatts. Let's say 100 gigawatts. Let's say you did need 100 gigawatt hours, and that's for
Yeah.
data centers over multiple years. We have currently 40 gigawatt hours of capacity, and another 40 is being built at least, and then you have capacity coming online from other sources. So it's not a concern from my perspective, at least in the next 5 years.
Well, I mean, yeah, that definitely, makes a big difference, and I think aligns with the Casey Hanmer, in his conversation with Dorkesh Patel. He essentially predicted that we're going to probably use quite a bit of natural gas for a lot of the power that's going to go into data centers, at least here in the United States, up through like 2027. And, having those natural gas turbines supply the majority of that load from now until then should significantly reduce the overall demand for megapacks, but I'm sure there, will be some build out of megapacks along with that. But yeah, especially if you look at, okay, then solar and batteries starts to take over from 2027 onward, there should be significantly more capacity for those energy storage pieces of the puzzle that are being added in. I mean, what's your take on his overall prediction that that solar and batteries basically in the late 2030s will begin to take over the data center load and will be more than sufficient to keep up with demand?
Yeah, I think that's overall true. I disagree with his contention that we need 24 hours of battery backup for these sites. If it did require 24 hours of battery backup, then you would run out of batteries. But if you use the model earlier where I said you need like an hour or two of backup, then we're going to have plenty of batteries. And the way it's like, all right, do you want to build? Does it make more sense to drastically decrease the size of your solar farm and the batteries you use and add a tiny generator, or the inverse? Because that's what you're looking at. I'm not sure why he assumes that gas generation is not going to be used as part of the mix. Because as I said, it only takes a tiny bit of gas generation, maybe 5 to 10% of your total load, and you can decrease the amount of batteries and solar that you need by multiple times. And what it's all about with these building out these data centers is building them as quickly as possible. Now, I do think later, like beyond 2030, you're going to see, doubtless, I think all of them are going to be mostly solar and batteries. And he is correct that there's no reason why you can't build these with 100% solar and batteries today. It's just what's the most expedient and cheapest way to do it. And for me, from my perspective, at least for the next 5 years, that involves a little bit of gas or some other supplemental power from the grid. Now, he's also said that he thinks chips are going to be the bottleneck. I think that's overall true, but I think it's an oversimplification of the problem, and I think it's kind of a moot point. Do you want me to riff on that, or do you want to jump in here with...
Yeah, no, I'm very interested. Keep going.
Okay. Tesla. Building a vehicle is like the most complex and difficult thing to manufacture in the world. How often is it that Tesla just has one bottleneck? It's like, well, yeah, overall, there's going to be specific bottlenecks Tesla has for their vehicles, but does it really matter in the long run? Because you're going to be playing whack-a-mole with 10,000 or even 1 million different parts and components spread across the globe. So I think it's like, well, yeah, but the main question we have to ask ourselves is, if you're looking at a specific company, are they doing all they can to maximize the amount of chip supply they have? Or does a specific company, are they likely to have that bottleneck? And that's why Elon is working on this deal with Samsung, why he's also maintaining relationships with TSMC, Nvidia, getting compute through Oracle. He has at least 4 to 5 different sources.
And Dell.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. At least 4 to 5 different sources of compute in any form over the next 4 to 5 years. So I'm not worried about that bottleneck, because he has that backstopped multiple times.
Yeah, he's thought about it from a supply chain perspective, and diversified, and continuing to invest in continued diversification in the future. Yeah, I mean, it almost mirrors in some ways, Jensen. This is more on the supply side than the demand side, but that's one of the things that Jensen has done such a great job of, over the years, is that he has invested well ahead of the curve in seeding new markets of demand, and kind of building out the early stages of platforms for different areas to be able to take advantage of accelerated parallel compute. And I think that's one of the things that Elon is doing right now with on the supply side for the compute, is, and the Samsung deal being the best example of that. But he was helping TSMC do some development of more advanced packaging technology for Dojo. Obviously, that didn't play out as well as they had hoped it would, for a couple of different reasons. But now he's investing heavily in Samsung to see if advanced packaging or more complicated forms of packaging are not necessarily going to be the ticket in the future, well, then we're going to go over here with Samsung, and we're going to go with like efficient and just bulletproof process and mass scale, and something that we can install in both the data center and in the cars and at the edge. And like, maybe that is an area that could materialize in the future as a big competitive advantage. We don't know. We're going to go ahead and invest there. If not, well, then at least we've always got the ability to fall back to AMD, to fall back to Nvidia, which I don't think they ever would necessarily for the chips in the actual edge devices, but in the cloud at least.
Well, I feel like, as Elon said, the best way to put it is it's an evolutionary dead end. And if we look at, I don't think it's necessarily, when they started the Dojo program, that was the best decision that they possibly could have made at that time. But as the landscape changes, you have to shift your strategy as well. It would be idiotic to do something that doesn't align with reality. Reality dictates everything. And the reality is that when they first started that Dojo program, Nvidia had a very fledgling program for their, I think they were on their second generation of their purely dedicated AI chips. So it's early days. And
yeah, we're talking about, A100s were the things that they were trying to get, not...
They started the Dojo program like in 2018 or 2019. And it was really early days. So Elon's like, well, there's only one place that's really supplying these chips, and the chips are far inferior compared to what I foresee us needing. So we need to create our own program as a backstop in case that doesn't pan out. Well, Nvidia continued to iterate on their chips, and they got better, faster, cheaper. And in the meantime, it turned out that we don't need that much training compute. Training compute is only going to be a fraction of what we need. Why are we going to be putting so much more effort into the Dojo program versus the chips that we're putting in our vehicles, when the chips that we're putting in our vehicles are so much more important? It's a complete mismatch in terms of cost benefit. So the easiest thing to do was like focus on the inference, and then we're going to get training off the back end of it.
Absolutely.
Small rant there. Sorry.
It is just, something that you love to see Elon be able to do, is continually update the assumptions and think from first principles and be willing to, I think a lot of people are disappointed in the Dojo project getting axed. But I think from an executive management standpoint, it really continues to demonstrate that he is able to prune the tree when needed, where needed, and, not allow sentimentality or other factors that shouldn't really be driving those decisions to cause you to waste time, energy, and money when they're not actually advancing you towards your overall mission and your overall goals. And yeah, like you said, Nvidia, they woke up, they competed, they won, and Elon always says, hey, we would like to not have to do all these different things. We do them because we can't find people who can do them fast enough, cheap enough, at a level that really supplies our needs. And Jensen,
or it's mission critical. That's another thing. Yeah.
Well, yes, it is mission critical. And for the reason, because it is mission critical, they will continue to invest in AI. Like AI 6 and Dojo 3 are still a hedge that they will maintain. It just won't be the same exact architecture that they were pursuing with Dojo 2. But that said, even in that mission critical area, they can rely pretty well on Nvidia to supply them with what they need to accomplish their mission, because Nvidia has executed so well. It is so mission critical for Nvidia. Like this, their business, relies on them executing in this arena as a whole. And Elon can be a big customer for them without necessarily, them relying on him to do their business. Like he can bet on outcomes that Nvidia is going to work towards for their own interests, but then his just happen to be very aligned.
And there's a mutually beneficial relationship there beyond the obvious financial benefits for Nvidia to sell these chips. It's Elon's building the flagship data centers for these chips. So it's like, if you're Jensen Huang, you're like, who are you going to give these chips to? You're going to give the person that can move the chips the fastest and build the most impressive data center and get those chips to do tricks that nobody else is or can. And right now that person is Elon. So it's
especially at the speed that, they do them, because, if he can give Mark Zuckerberg an allocation of 100,000 H100s on, today, and tomorrow he can give 100,000 to Elon, and Elon's going to have that data center up and running, 3 months from now, and Mark is not going to have that data center up and running for 12 months or 18 months. Well, obviously you want to give those chips to Elon first, because then he creates that flagship thing that becomes the standard that everyone else begins to measure themselves against and has to pursue. And yes, just like the double whammy of what they're able to accomplish, and then the speed that they're able to accomplish really gives them an extra advantage. And it's a no-brainer for Jensen, because Elon is driving demand for Nvidia data center GPUs probably more than any other single person on the planet.
Oh yeah, and not only that, looking back, Elon is kind of the one that helped kickstart it, because he got one of the first A100s, or I forget which version it was, but
it was a DGX whatever.
Okay, yeah. It was at OpenAI, he got one of those, the first ones. He was one of the first customers, and now he's maintained that relationship, and now he's the star customer. And it also especially helps Jensen that Elon tweets about this stuff, and Elon has or posts about this stuff, and he has hundreds of millions of followers, and it's generating a lot of interest in what Nvidia does. I wouldn't have an interest in Nvidia if it wasn't for Tesla and XAI.
Yep. And I think it also, I was just thinking about this in a conversation that I had the other day, how close Elon has been to this entire field since its inception. That he was one of the early funders of Demis Hassabis during the DeepMind phase before it was even purchased by Google. And so he's been closely monitoring and funding and participating in the evolution of AI since the early days. Then when Google bought up DeepMind from him, then he says, okay, I'm a little bit scared of, like, I love DeepMind. I'm a little bit scared of DeepMind now living at Google with Larry Page. I like Demis. I don't know that I like Larry anymore since he's not sufficiently specious. And so then he goes all in with Sam. Of course, Sam being the weasel that Sam is, that doesn't work out very well. Sorry, Elon, poor judge of character on that one. But Ilya, he was able to pull Ilya Sutskever away from DeepMind into OpenAI. His presence in OpenAI then helps build OpenAI into what it becomes. And like Elon's right there for each and every one of these steps. He's right there for, then OpenAI getting that first DGX computer from Jensen. And like he's just present for all of these key critical moments. And then, after ImageNet, he realizes, I guess we better have cameras and neural net computers on all of our cars. And so we're going to start making those investments. But he just kind of resisted. He's got so many things on his plate. Mm-hmm. He resisted being directly involved and being the CEO, kind of like he did with Tesla. He invested in Tesla in the early days, allowed Mark, I can't remember, is it Mark Tarpening or Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpening? I think the original, and then there was one other guy, who were the original management team of Tesla to, he wanted to just run SpaceX and let them do the Tesla thing and just provide the capital. And that didn't work out. And eventually he said, this was a moral failing on my part that I just didn't take responsibility for Tesla from the beginning. Now I've got to come in and do this.
Imagine if Elon would have jumped into AI with both feet.
Exactly.
Like years earlier. We would probably already be at AGI because look at how fast he's moving now that he decided to move. And it's blistering pace that they're moving. Just all the updates that we're getting on Grok every day and the speed that XAI is building out their data centers. Yeah, if that would have started 5 or 10 years earlier. But to your point, it's like those movies where they show a time traveler showing up in like important events in the world in specific photos. And that's like Elon. He's always in the photo like a time traveler at the most critical junctures with AI. And now he's finally, decided to give up the time traveler thing and actually participate.
Yep. It is crazy. And so how does that, what's happened with AI over the last few years and what's going on right now with energy, what is the limiting factor in your mind today? Like, what are you spending the most amount of your time researching and trying to quantify, understand? Like,
it's just putting all the puzzle pieces together. Because as I said, this is something that everybody's still trying to get their mind around. It's kind of like anytime there's a new technology, it's often a mixture of the technologies that came before it. So you have to understand those component technologies to understand how it's going to play out. So after I watched that, what is it, Casey? What was his name again? Casey Handemer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. After I watched that, I was like, I better look into chips a bit more just to understand that as a bottleneck and make sure I don't have a blind spot there. So I was just going to do a video on energy for my 1 terawatt of compute series. And then I was like, okay, I have to break this up into like a 3-part series now. I have to explain why 1 terawatt hour is important. I have to cover the chips because they're probably the main bottleneck. But the one of the main points of that video is that, yes, this is why chips are so important and why they are more likely to be a bottleneck. But also, ultimately, it doesn't matter because of all the different components that are going to be going into it. We're talking about multiple hundreds of industries that are involved here, even just the little brackets that you need to mount the servers inside the cases and do the packaging. But I think the most interesting part of it, and what I'm going to be focusing is on the energy. Why is that? Because all these chips are going to be made behind closed doors in bunny suits. You're not going to be really able to witness it. It's going to be pretty well localized, and it's not going to affect many people outside of the factory. And most of that is going to be outsourced by Tesla. Now, that's as opposed to the energy side of it, where you're going to be moving millions of tons of equipment. It's going to be everywhere. It's going to affect your grid. It's going to affect everybody everywhere. And it's going to be a very visible, just like we started seeing wind turbines decades ago, and those started appearing on the landscapes. It's the heavy infrastructure that's going to be involved that's going to be really interesting, and the logistics involved. And that's where, and those things, that's where XAI and Tesla are going to play very visible roles. And I'm invested in Tesla, bigly invested in Tesla. Most of my net worth is in Tesla, so it's like that increases my my interest level. So it's, I think the power and heavy industry that are going to be involved are just as important as the chips. I don't think you can put one before the other. But it's going to be a more visible and interesting challenge to solve that I'm vested in personally. So that's what I'm going to look into. Yeah.
And how do you think about the algorithms and then like the human talent components of developing AI? Is that something that captures, a significant portion of your attention as well?
It's something that I don't have any type of insight into. I think it's not as visible and not as concrete for me. So it's not something I focus on. I do think it's just as important, but I also know that there's going to be a range of companies competing in this field, and the companies that are doing the best work, the most interesting work that motivates engineers the most, they're not going to have any problem getting the talent they need. I'm more concerned about welders and pipe fitters and things like that than I am concerned about the top level talent that's at the very tip of the spear, because those people will be attracted to those roles, specifically XAI at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, we did just see, Elon was able to poach a couple of high-level people from Meta, even, million and billion-dollar compensation packages notwithstanding. And yeah, Elon's ability to attract, like you said, the smartest, most SEAL-like, Navy SEAL-like people in that field to work on that specific team and that specific project is quite unparalleled. But we do, because of the scale that you're talking about, it drives just a need for welders and electricians and, all sorts of men and women in the trades, of all types. You got cooling, on top of the electricity component, and that's going to be, a big thing. So AC and not liquid cooling, so you've got chillers, but then all kinds of different form factors of cooling that is going to be required there. This is really an unprecedented scale worth of infrastructure build out. And then if we do get into building solar, large fields of solar power, then all of the trades that go into installing those and getting those out there, and it's going to be quite the project.
Mm-hmm. And how many people want to move out into the middle of the desert for a few years to build something like that? So it's not only do you have to find people with the skills, you have to find people with the skills that are willing to, either take their family with them or move away from their family for years at a time, and consistently do that probably over the course of a decade or a couple of decades while these build outs occur.
Well, it's one of the reasons why I think Texas is good, but a lot of different places in the Midwest where oil and gas are a big deal is because that's been, the way that a lot of people make their living for a long time. That you go wherever the oil field is that we're drilling, and you got to coalesce a whole bunch of people out here in the middle of nowhere. And, the compensation structures around that and just lifestyle habits and everything that, those types of workforces do exist here and can be applied to hard, physical, dirty work.
Thank God everybody didn't learn to code. So like yeah, I would have preferred to have I wanted to go into like do a trade when I was younger, but there's a big push from our parents' generation to get like white collar job in like an air conditioned building somewhere. But the problem was that everybody pushed their children into those type of jobs. So there's a glut. You can't just have every kid go after this you know, this ivory tower. And it's not all that it's cracked up to be. I think a lot of there wasn't an appreciation for the negative aspects of working in an environment like that. Sitting all day, whew, sitting all day was harder on me than it ever was doing like car detailing or laying fiber optic cable or working in a factory. Just being rigid all day, just typing at your desk.
Yep.
Anyhow, that's a big divergence from the topic, but yeah, point of passion.
It is. Well, I just to double click on that for a second. Like the impact on your body over time. Like it's better to be putting your body through its paces, in a physical job from a health standpoint, I think in many ways than just sitting around all day, every day. Definitely. I notice it.
Of burden.
So circling then back to AI and energy efficiency, who are the other big players that you feel like have to be monitored in order to really predict with certainty the future? Are you thinking about Nvidia? Are you thinking about the Chinese model companies, Chinese car competitors, Chinese AI companies? What are the underappreciated elements of the landscape?
Well, I guess there's two sides of it. There's competitors, and we have OpenAI, we have Meta, we have Google. Those are probably the big ones in the United States. But each of them has kind of taken a slightly different angle, and they're each a different part of the ecosystem. They're attracting different people for different products. So I guess in order to define what's important or what's relevant to you or in general, it depends on what your end state goal is and what you want to achieve. Now, if you want to make money and invest, well, I know where I'm putting my money because it's Elon and his companies. As far as who takes the most market share, I think Google and ChatGPT are in a really good position. Google, for the reason of they already have their customers baked in. People are already automatically using their product because they automatically go search Google several times a day. So Google has a built-in customer base. ChatGPT people are familiar with. But the thing with OpenAI is it seems to be like a dying organization, a dying culture from my perspective. Maybe that's completely wrong, but it's not a place that would really spark my interest to work. XAI is moving the fastest. They have the most interesting culture. It would be the most persuasive place to work. So I feel like Google has better name recognition. They're already a large established player. So if I was to pit those two against each other, I would choose Google over OpenAI any day. And on top of that, Google has some secret tricks up their sleeve. They've been investing in this stuff for like a decade. They may be able to, for instance, do distributed training. That's something people are talking about. And one of the big advantages that XAI has is Elon is able to move so quick and build data centers so quick and so large that it's giving them an advantage in compute. Now, what happens if Google is able to distribute, those single data centers into a bunch of different data centers? That might give them an edge on compute. But I don't know if that edge would be durable in the long term because other players like XAI and Nvidia are also probably working on that. I guess if you were to boil it down to who's going to have the best model and the best technology, I think it's going to be an XAI. But I don't think it's going to be a winner takes all situation. Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting to see how the competition is evolving, and so far we haven't seen the types of runaway success by any of these players that a lot of people have been afraid of and predicted that we would see. That instead of people getting farther apart, it seems like they have been getting closer together. It will be very interesting to see if that continues based on the rate of progress that Elon and XAI have been making. That yes, for right now, GPT-5, Grok 4, the Gemini models, and some other players are all kind of converged around a generally equivalent amount of performance. But Grok came from so far behind that for it to be even in that conversation right now is pretty crazy. And, there's significant possibility that they can push ahead to a place that other people can't follow quickly. And if that were to be the case, then it might actually then put that scenario back on the table that people have been worried about of, one player being able to rapidly create more distance from other companies. But to your point, yeah, like Google specifically is in such a great place. They have talent. I think Google DeepMind can attract people just like XAI can attract people, especially given some of the incredible accomplishments that they've made recently. They obviously have the TPU architecture, which is the only legitimate, ecosystem that can compete with Nvidia GPUs plus CUDA. They have, untold amount of money to throw at projects, and they have more data than God. So between all of those things, that's a lot of, those are a lot of advantages. But then to Casey Hanmer's point, if your bottlenecks then expand out beyond those things and they get to the point of real world infrastructure elements like we've been talking about, whether the energy, the cooling, the permitting, all of these types of things, that's an area of advantage that Elon and XAI definitely have above and beyond Google. And they have the, small, lean team culture that allows them to move at a pace that's pretty unparalleled.
I feel like I need, or somebody needs to build like, one of those tables that has like green boxes for where they're excelling and yellow and red for like where they're falling behind. But I feel like XAI ticks the most boxes in terms of across the whole stack of things that's needed, and the fact that Elon has a lot of ideas on how to monetize. Elon's very good at pursuing a technology and then working out a way to monetize it later. And you can see this. He's listed all sorts of ways now that they might be able to make money off of it.
Gooning being one of them.
Yeah, well, it's legitimate. That's how we got the internet, gooning. So that's the substrate of the information age. Is gooning.
It is quite impressive to see his ability to back into a business model after, creating a technology in, creative and maybe unpopular ways, like Demis is just never gonna pursue that avenue at Google. Both like Demis personally is never going to do that, and Google as an organization is never going to do that. And it does constrain the space of possible solutions that they're going to pursue, and gives Elon an opportunity to end around some of the advantages that they have.
He's willing to give the people what they want. Whereas a lot of companies are too hamstrung by their PR departments and marketing departments to really give people what they want. So that's another benefit of having Elon at the helm of these things. You have a clear leader that's unafraid to do things that are might look unsavory or unpopular, but everybody really wants. So, yeah. Despite the outcry, he'll press on.
It's like, the Amazon analogy. Everyone hates Jeff Bezos, but everyone still buys from Amazon. So,
Yep. People can hate you all they want. But yeah, it's ultimately about succeeding. And I'm not saying that you should try to succeed at all costs and step on people on the way up. And that's another thing that Elon's great at. He doesn't um, he has a good moral backbone. And it's so strong that it actually works against him sometimes. He has a very clear moral sense. Um, so gets him into hot water, but also keeps him out of uh, really bad situations in the past.
Well, I think there, might be a lot of people who would disagree with that, but
Yeah.
I think one example maybe to put forward just for a moment is, think about how cutthroat the technology landscape was, you know, during the 1990s and even, somewhat into the early 2000s, the type of anti-competitive behavior that Microsoft engaged in. And, they obviously were not the first to do that kind of thing. Andy Grove and his management of Intel and the worldview behind Only the Paranoid Survive, was a dominant culture in Silicon Valley for a long time. And yeah, we have never seen Elon engage in the type of cutthroat and predatory business practices to try and destroy new entrants, cut off competitors at the knees just because they can and they think that they should. Like, there's a lot of gangster and mob tactics that were standard corporate practice that we've never really seen from him in any substantial way. And I think that's one of the things that goes underappreciated, that he's so good at accomplishing the things that he does, and at the same time doesn't have to resort to a lot of the lowbrow strategies and tactics that so many others in the past who have tried to do the types of things that he's doing have done.
Yeah, he likes a fair fight, and he may the best man win is probably a good way to sum it up. But yeah, I totally agree, and it's not something I've ever thought about much. But yeah, he doesn't. He encourages competition rather than suppresses it. He wants to see humanity advance. He has very high. He takes a lofty view on his sense of competition. Yeah, what's best for humanity.
Yeah, very much.
A lot of
so.
people disagree with the way he goes about it, but that is his goal.
Well, and it's hard to argue, though, even from those other perspectives, that his approach is not vastly preferable to the approach of other people. Even if you disagree with where he wants to go, I'd rather have Elon doing what Elon is trying to do than Bill Gates or many other figures that would have or could have been the ones trying to do this.
Yeah, I've never seen a really solid argument against Elon that actually holds water. It's just personal quibbles and stylistic irritations, and
the fact that he has lots of resources at his disposal, which is kind of unavoidable to accomplish things at the scale that he's trying to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, he earned it. So yeah, he tackled the responsibility, and because of that, when you tackle responsibility in life, it tends to lead to more control and more authority over how the world is run. It's kind of like the Jordan Peterson thing: clean your room and then work your way up from there. You increasingly increase your sphere of influence as you get better at organizing yourself and the people around you, than at a broader societal level.
Yeah. And the upper limit of, where that can take you is not something that I think, very many people have explored. And it takes a very intense person to go to the types of lengths that Elon has gone to do that. And the world is definitely a better place for it.
Yeah. He's a smart person, but he's also brutally hardworking. And yeah, he's a really rare combination. And I know there's probably going to be some people squirming in the comments that ever since he got into politics, I find people get really sensitive, even more sensitive than in the past when you say something positive about Elon. I take more, like if I make, even just making videos about Tesla now and energy and things like that, if I even mention Tesla, there's a lot of people that get upset in the comments that think you're being a Cinco fan. It's like, well, what did I say that's incorrect? And they never come back with anything. It's like, well, I'm just acknowledging the fact that, he's done some impressive things.
And
So,
we've
and there,
been around the block a few times and been covering this whole progression from where he started to where he has arrived today for a lot longer than, I think a lot of people have just come to this topic more recently and don't have a deep grounding in what's going on.
That's a good point. If I look at my view of Elon in 2019, or even 2018, which is only about 3 years after I became aware of who he was, I was still, you sort of get to know people after they do enough things publicly. You have to follow somebody for like 3 to 5 years before you really understand what's going on with them. And a lot of people have only just discovered who Elon is in the past 6 months or a year. So they're completely oblivious to these. This is just a continuation of everything Elon has been doing since I've been following him since 2015. It's all patterns I've seen before, and I have a pretty good idea of how things are going to play out or potentially play out. But if you don't understand Elon, you're not familiar with him, it'll make people fearful or uncomfortable or irritated or whatever they feel about him. So,
is there anything else that you want to touch on while we're here?
No, I'm trying to think about if we covered everything from the power and chips perspective, but I think we pretty well covered that off. Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
so one definite thing for people
Mm-hmm.
is to go watch the the video that you recently put out on the chips, and then we'll put a link in the description. What is the title?
Oh, it was kind of clickbaity for me. It's like XAI, how XAI is going to crush Google and Meta and OpenAI, which I do honestly believe that. And Elon actually responded to that, and he said it's going to be a competitive landscape. But he did, and within that message, which was kind of buried in that message, and then a week later basically say, well, yeah, in the long term, I think we're going to win. Mm-hmm. And my definition of winning is being the largest company with the most powerful model. And by implication, the best talent. So, yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting competition for the next 2 to 3 years. But after that, I do think we won't move to a winner takes all, but I think the field will get thinned out.
Yes, and then the TAM will also grow. It's going to be wild.
Yeah, so. I don't think we're in an AI bubble yet, but I do think we could potentially have one in the next couple of years, and then it'll pop. And it's like that with any new technology. You have so many entrants, so much hype, and then reality sets in. And next few years, that'll all play out.
It is, I mean, just a crazy time to be alive. Elon is not lying when he says, I think that we live in the most interesting of times. And
no, I think
implications.
We've been heading, it is phenomenal because I feel like we've been headed toward this trajectory where we are today for like 4 billion years, from the times that we were a single cell organism to now we have the most, there's going to be a potential for true evolution for humans to evolve into something else. We're trying to find balance with our ecosystem. We're having difficulty reproducing. How's that going to play out? There's all these big questions at the moment, which have been coming on several different time frames coming to a head. So yeah, exciting times.
Yes. And then, all of that kind of overlaid with a geopolitical system that has kind of reached a tipping point in, like how much globalization can we do and how stable is that? And, is US empire and hegemony sustainable all at the same time?
Yes. And it's amazing that it all happens at the same time, because it feels like nothing was happening there for a couple of decades. There was, but I always felt like history was moving pretty slow when I was younger. 15, 20, 30 years ago, it's like, oh man, the pace of change, the pace of development is going way slower than I want it. Now it's getting up to the speed where I'm like, oh, this is great. Like I wake up every day and there's something interesting to chew into with my brain. And a lot of people are already overloaded, but this is the sweet spot for me. But who knows, maybe in, 5, 10 years from now, it'll out accelerate me. And maybe I'll feel like I'm floundering. But that's why we'll have Neuralink and
Exactly.
AI to help us.
Yeah. Grok, the Grok direct connection can keep us tied in.
This is another conversation entirely. But I have lots of thoughts on, where things are headed with synthetic life and how fast this square AI wave is going to hit us. I don't think it's going to be as fast as people think, because you have to move atoms in the real world. It's not like 2 to 3 years from now, everything's going to change. I think it's going to take 5, 10, 20 years in order to see changes in the world around us due to AI, our physical lives.
And I think that's where the bubble, ends up arising from, is the expectation that we can do so many physical things far faster than is actually possible.
Yeah, well, people, when you have a new technology wave, everybody gets excited about potential that they didn't realize was there before or didn't think was possible before. And then coming into this bubble, everybody invests into that idea, but they don't realize it takes years or even decades to backfill that for the rest of society. Now, people on the very cutting edge that use this stuff a lot and are very, very familiar with it or invested in it, we're going to experience that wave. We're like those buoys out in the ocean that detect a tsunami. We're like 100, 200 miles out, and we're going to experience that wave much sooner than everybody else. And it's going to hit the shore for them like a couple hours later. And in human time frames, you can think of that as years. So by the time the wave actually hits everybody else, we're going to be bored and we're going to be experiencing the next tsunami, whatever that is.
Well, and yeah, it's unfortunate that we can't be invested in XAI directly as retail investors between now and then. It's like that tsunami came and went, underneath our feet, and we missed it. We're not in a position to be able to catch that wave. But hopefully Tesla will make at least some, significant investment into XAI, especially given just the obvious, shared goals and, opportunities for mutual benefit between the data that Tesla has, the compute that XAI has, the algorithms that XAI is developing, and then the physical embodiment infrastructure and resources that Tesla has. And then you layer in, all the energy that XAI is going to need, that Tesla can play a significant role in providing, just like the opportunities for intertwinement there seems endless.
Yeah. And they probably will form like a super conglomerate company years down the road, but a lot of people think that's going to happen in the near future. I don't think so, because the reason why a lot of people are attracted to XAI to work there is because it's a startup atmosphere, and because, like, if you work at Google and they hit the AI jackpot, at most maybe it's going to grow like 5 or 10 times if they really find something useful. But if you're at XAI, you have a chance to multiple orders of magnitude of
10,000x type. Yeah.
So if you're vested in the company, there's a lot more motivation working with a smaller company, and you don't have to deal with the bureaucracy. There's just, there's so many benefits to the way that's structured. So, yeah.
Well, and also from a liability standpoint, in the world that we live in with legal challenges and wet blankets, placed over the economy that, I think that's something that investors overlook a lot. Is like, of course, I would love to be invested in all of these things in one nice little convenient bucket, but having all these things put together in one nice convenient bucket from an investment standpoint also makes it a honeypot from a legal standpoint for attacks. And so
That's a
you've
good
got
point.
to actually keep things somewhat separated, to help build up your defenses.
Yeah, firewalls, economies of scale versus risk. So, but for now, I think they have it structured the best way they can. So, and I'm happy to be invested in Tesla. I'm glad at least one of the companies are public, as it still has a potential to be a 10-bagger.
Yep.
So,
and potentially more. Yeah. I mean, Optimus is quite the project.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it could be. Yeah, we could see it 20 or 30x, but there are plenty of people making their speculation videos about what could happen. So my goal and my duty is to say, yes, that's possible based on the technology that I see and based on the potential bottlenecks that could be out there, the limiting factors. So
like and subscribe.
Yeah,
go find
there you
Jordan
go.
Giesige on YouTube at The Limiting Factor and The Limiting Factor on X as well. It's Limiting the, I think, is the...
Yeah, at Limiting the, but like if you type in my name, that'll come up.
Yep.
So
cool. Well, thank you for spending the time with us today, for helping us to explore these ideas, hopefully helping the audience get a little bit more informed, a little bit smarter. And we will catch y'all the next time.